It just came out and with me, yeah. Didn't mean to call you baby. Yeah, yeah. It just came out there. Yeah, but my heart's been hurting.
Sego, it is June 9th. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Saga Nation, and rebroadcast on great stations like The Gway, CKWE in Tandanega, networks like Real People's Media, Indigenous Resistance Radio, and Netroots Radio. So you can find us in any number of places. We are broadcasting live, streaming online at, you can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. That is our own network for this, for our streaming. We stream through Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net. And of course, we're streaming live on Facebook, so you can join us here. I also want to mention again, and I'll do it each week for, well, probably forever, that we also have a channel on YouTube. So what we film here today, not through our Facebook live stream, but with Jake Proud rolling on camera here, we post the shows up on our Let's Talk Native TV YouTube channel. So you can find us there as well. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer. Joined in studio by Matt Hill on the board.
Hi.
And Ed Schindler joining us as well.
Good morning.
And as I said, Jake Proud behind the camera, out of Mike's reach, shooting some video for our YouTube channel. Our studio engineer is Kelly McMillan, and I thank her for her fine work. The opening song was Didn't Mean to Call You Baby, and that's Murray Porter from his Songs Lived and Life Played CD, Juno Award-winning CD, I might add. Good friend of ours, Murray Porter. Look, kind of an interesting week on the American front, on the British front, on various various places. Another terrorist attack in Great Britain. Some people ran over some folks there, and Theresa May, who thought she was going to build, the Prime Minister of Canada thought she was going to build a stronger coalition for her Brexit from the European Union. End up losing seats in their parliament. So interesting stuff there. Of course, on the American side, James Comey was in front of a Senate hearing on intelligence, I guess. Intelligence hearing, I think it was. The Senate Committee on Intelligence. And basically did his own little tell-all about Trump's interfering with obstruction of justice, I would say, on the federal investigation onto Russia interfering with the American elections and whatever role Trump and his campaign have had with that. Interesting, lots of news. In fact, that one was at least important enough on WBAI, the station that I do my show in New York on, was that I got preempted for that. That was actually Thursday from 10 till 1 o'clock that many stations were carrying it, but WBAI did as well. So I got to stay home this week and got some good R&R out of it, but listen to a little bit of that. Interesting because, it's really easy to get sucked into these world events from a Native perspective. My good friend Paul Delarone is always quick to remind me and others who we monitor this stuff, we follow this stuff, and we understand that there's some relevance. But I know that there's others like me who sometimes can get drawn into these global conflicts and even some of the American stuff. And Paul's quick to remind, to say, look, there's not a whole lot you're going to do sitting here in Haudenosaunee territory about Syria or Somalia or or frankly, even Dakota Access Pipeline. The question is, what are you going to do about the battles that you face? So whether the United States or Great Britain or Europe or any place else, and whatever's happening with, violence, terrorism, war, whatever else, what do we do? And I think it's important to know what's happening in the world. That way we can sift through the BS that we're being fed and how much things are propagandized. That's why I offered that challenge, and we talked about it on our last show when I suggested that the American military does not fight for freedom, it fights for domination. That's an observation. Not everybody's going to agree with me, and I frankly enjoy the debate. But I want to propose something else here today, and that's, before the show, Matt and Ed and I, we talked a little bit, and this is my view, and this is the view that I want to open up to discussion. It is my view that if you are a Native person and you are comfortable with the way things are, just the way they are right now, then you are probably more part of the problem than anything else. If you've found a comfortable place within the colonialism that has plagued our people and, frankly, the planet, because make no mistake about it, colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, these are the things that have placed the entire planet in peril. But if you've got a comfortable place in that and you don't want to disrupt that, you don't want to change things, even your nativeness is something that you're comfortable dancing at a powwow, or maybe putting a bumper sticker on your car. Maybe get a job with the tribe, deal some cards at the casino. Whatever it is, and I'm not condemning any of that stuff. But if those things have left you content to the point that you don't think there's room for improvement, if you consider Longhouse your religion, that you only have to practice at ceremony time, or if you found a way to mesh Christianity and your identity in such a way that you're just content, then maybe that's part of the problem. And that's what I want to discuss. Because I think, and this is, again, my view on this thing, I think no matter who you are, frankly, even non-native, but no matter who you are, we can all take steps towards the path that we know we should be on. And if you don't recognize that there's a path that we should be on, and I know people want to call it the Red Road and all kinds of other stuff, whatever you call it, if you don't think that your life today, no matter where you are, that there's a step that you can take in that direction. I'm not suggesting that we need to, I said in my promo for the show, I'm not calling for a revolution. I'm calling for a baby step. And maybe another baby step. I just think that there's so much, and we experience this all the time, and the people who listen to the show and who I have the opportunity to engage with in Facebook and otherwise, in my show in New York or whatever, all so often I hear people say, man, I'm glad you mentioned that. It made me think about some things a different way. And that's what I'm suggesting is if we apply critical thinking, something we talk about here all the time on the show, if we apply some critical thinking and then look for some critical solutions along the way, then I think that there is a step we can take back towards that path that we know we should be on. So I throw that out there. I don't know what your thoughts are, Ed. We talk about this thing all the time. First and foremost, I think the White Roots of Peace say that everybody has a step they can take closer to that sanctuary, if you will, or that protection of that great tree of peace, or whatever, however you want to refer to it. But I guess that's the question. So I throw it out to you guys.
One of the things that I've concluded, at least from my perspective, is that there's a need for people to understand and clearly understand what a community is, okay? And then figure out what is the purpose of that community which they may be part of. Those are things which people are not being aware of. And I think it starts off with the education system, because the education system is basically indoctrinating people to be part of pretty much the ignorant within the U.S. and other parts of the world. And I think that's something we have to start addressing with each other.
I think one of the main drivers that we got to be looking at, have to be looking at, is the seventh generation. What are we doing today in doing or not doing that is going to impact that seventh generation? That seems to be a major element that is being neglected, and it needs to be looked at or kept in the back of our minds or forefront even. One of the things that the threats that's been a buzz coming around is mostly on the Canadian side is municipalities. They're trying to what's the word I want to use here?
I guess if you want to turn that into a verb, municipalize.
That's what I was trying to say.
Too many syllables. Trying to turn our territories into municipalities.
Yeah. And that's going to open a door for taxation and a lot of other things. The jurisdiction. We're kind of battling with that here in Cattaraugus, but those are all issues that need to be looked at in a realistic way because, like you said, what are we doing? Are we comfortable with that? And if you ask me, there's a lot of people that are just comfortable with having, say, the police driving up and down the roads and pulling people over, and they turn a blind eye to it. And
and again, it goes deeper than that. I mean, I go back to this issue. You travel to Oneida. We can talk about that a little bit later. But you travel to Oneida this week. That's a trip that I have trouble making because of the border issues. Mm-hmm. But I know when the Department of Homeland Security did their Western Hemisphere travel initiative and tried to stiffen up the travel documents that are required for crossing the border. I know a lot of Native people said, I'm just going to go get a passport. It's easier. And we get into this debate about, okay, well, what about citizenship? I saw somebody post this week on Facebook something about Ben Campbell. Of course, most people know him as Ben Nighthorse Campbell. And they went on to say that Ben Nighthorse Campbell is a citizen of whatever nation, Choctaw, whatever he was, whatever they said he was. And I said, no, he isn't. Ben Nighthorse Campbell was a citizen of the United States, or is a citizen of the United States. That's why he was a senator. Started out as a Democratic congressman, switched parties, became a Republican. And frankly, he is one of the guys, and one of the things that he was trying to say, he was trying to offer some sort of statement about suicide. He made a comment about being at Wounded Knee when they're doing some sort of, commemoration of some sort, and he said that a pickup truck with a bunch of white guys showed up, and they all jumped out and they pulled out wigs so like they had scalps, and our young people saw that, and that's the kind of stuff that embeds itself in our young people, and made a direct connection to that kind of racism to suicide. And I said, no, I'm sorry. That's the kind of stuff that angers us, that makes us want to lash out at those people. But that's not the kind of stuff that makes us want to kill ourselves. The reason we have suicide problems is because of American policies that guys like Ben Nighthorse Campbell were part of promoting. Mm-hmm. So we get into this whole debate about, again, about identity and about who we are. So when we get into this idea of where are those comfortable places, the fact that we have people that are more comfortable running for office in the federal system mm-hmm. than trying to represent leadership for our own children. That's where some of that issue is.
Or even very basically is to stand up and be a role model in the community.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your contribution to our society, our community as a role model? Are you going to be the positive one or are you going to be the negative one? That's a question you got to ask yourself. And I just wanted to go back. You're talking about my trip to Oneida, and one of the things that I had to laugh to myself about is when I'm coming back into the United States, and the border agent is in his booth there, and he had I don't know exactly what dialect he was, but
accent or whatever. Yeah,
I think he was German.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, like first generation German.
Yeah.
I mean, it just
strong accent.
It just sounded funny, because all I could think of was the Gestapo, and I mean, not not to I mean, make
all these German stereotypes, right? Yeah, we look at you that way too, folks.
But I just had to laugh to myself, and I think, here this guy is probably a fresh immigrant, based on his accent and stuff, questioning me about coming into the on this side of the border.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, because I don't want to dance around it. Obviously, we lost a good friend this week. We lost Jacques. He completed all his days, as they say, in our funeral services. A lot of people, they try to come up with all these other euphemisms for dying, and passed away, made the journey, all that other stuff. In our language, what we refer to it as he lived all his days, and we don't know that he's completed his path. He's completed his time amongst us, but so that's what you went to Oneida for the funeral, and it sounded like it was. These are. We got into a bit of debate, and we'll do a whole show on this at some point. But it sounded like you had an opportunity to sit with some folks that that only funerals and weddings get us to oftentimes bring us together. But the thing about the funerals that I've had the opportunity to attend, there's grieving, but they are not sad gatherings. There's laughter. Mm-hmm. There's, in fact, you got the chance to, talk about running into Darren. Yep. And for those who don't know, our buddy at CKWE, Darren Doreen, you had a chance encounter with him.
Standing next to him, talking to him for a few minutes, and before I even realized it was him. That was when I first got there, but that was interesting for me.
Yeah, and it's funny because we only know each other's voice on radio or on telephone and that kind of thing. So it was, and again, so Jacques Day, even in death, is still bringing us together, and that's just one of those great things. So I'm glad you were able to make the trip. But again, the reason we got on the subject is because there are those comfortable places that people choose, and those actions people choose within the system that is dictated to us by Canada, the United States. And not everybody. I have to, it's a little bit more burdensome for me because I've got a past that is checkered by law enforcement, so to speak. So it's not easy for me to cross the border. But I remember when they were first talking about stiffening up the travel document requirements, I heard people on both sides say, "Well, I'm just going to go ahead and get a passport," not understanding that passport is a declaration of citizenship. Mm-hmm. Even those enhanced driver's license and tribal IDs, excuse me, those also would become these declarations. Because one of the first, I remember when the Seneca Nation who offered them up, hardly anybody took them up on it, but Seneca Nation offered up these enhanced, they called ETCs, enhanced tribal cards. The first requirement is that you prove you were born in the United States. So in other words, the first requirement for those cards was proof of citizenship. Mm-hmm. And on the cards, they insist, even on a again, enhanced tribal card, they want to put an American flag or a Canadian flag on there. Because if you're Native, you have to be one or the other as far as the United States and Canada is concerned. That goes back to the whole lacrosse player, Iroquois Nationals, not being able to go to England. But the idea that anybody would get excited about having a tribal ID that has an American flag on it. And why? Because it's not really a tribal ID. It's a federal ID that we get to put Seneca Nation on, or Oneida Nation on, or St. Regis Tribe on, or Navajo, or whatever. But and I guess this gets back to that question: is are we that comfortable with the idea of having a few links added to the chain around our neck, to where we're saying, okay, this is. It's almost like freedom. and if you are comfortable, if you're not wearing that chain out, if you're not trying to take links out of it, if you're not trying to break it, then not only are you not helping to advance sovereignty, but you're actually holding other people back. Because that's the other challenge they have. Those people who are most comfortable are the ones who will say, "Oh no, don't do that. Don't you dare go out on the thruway. Don't you don't raise that issue. Let's not. They're gonna, they'll call us terrorists. You can't do that. I
can remember talking to friends. They were going to Alaska, I believe, on a tour, on a cruise. Yeah. And they had to get passports. I said, "Oh, you got your Haudenosaunee passport?" They said, "No, we just got an American one. It was easier."
Yeah.
So they would rather just give everything all up. That don't matter. But that's kind of what I was talking about. What are our actions doing that are affecting the seventh generation? Are we protecting them? Are we perpetuating our status? Are we looking out for them?
Well, and what it is it's not, for one thing, it's not even seven generations. It's the immediate generation and then the one following. But is the comfort that you're finding, and I'm going to use that word comfort, but if you're comfortable with it, what are you changing? You're creating a new normal.
Yep.
What is the new normal? So if the normal is
to acquiesce,
yeah, I mean you are essentially complying with this subjugation. So that's I think that's the issue. There are so many great solutions and processes laid out in the Guyana de Goa, not just in the Guyana de Goa, but our grandparents, our great grandparents. And I'm not saying that they weren't already adversely affected by much of this, but if you look back in our culture, there are answers to almost every problem that we could have faced, because we've been living here in our homelands for tens of thousands of years, not just for hundreds of years. So the things that people seem to be challenged by, even now, as we deal with this, with the opioid and the fentanyl addiction, the heroin problem. That's not a new problem for us. It's just the names have been changed. Yeah, I mean, I quote oftentimes, I don't know if I got it here, that Ben Franklin, comment about how, if we need to extirpate the savages, the means might be rum. I mean, that's literally what Ben Franklin suggested. And so, I mean, we're not producing heroin here. It comes to our territories. So somebody's making sure there's a steady supply. And yeah, I know they're quick to put it on television when they bust somebody with some money and some, more. I mean, I saw one today. 40 pounds of weed and $700,000. And that sounds like, they took this huge bite out of crime, right? Old McGruff, the crime dog, right? But in the meantime, more deaths. More deaths, not just on our territories, but it's become a little bit more of it's gained a sense of urgency, because now white people are dying by it. It's not just people of color committing suicide and drunkenness and and all of that stuff, gang shootings. And now all of a sudden, nice white boys are seeing their death, and so it now becomes a sense of urgency.
Remember when we were in the Lancaster discussion, they were talking about that school there, and it was having a big heroin problem there.
Yeah,
I mean, so it's not just stuck to one place.
No, and again, I think because some of that problem has expanded into the dominant society, I think it becomes a little bit more of a sense of urgency. But and again, my point is that we have faced many of these issues, and I got to go back to that conversation about about what threats we have faced, and invasions, faced, alcohol being used as a tool, an instrument, as you called it just now, an instrument against us. The schools, the residential, all that stuff, but yet we're still here. We've survived. And my point is that what people are okay with? Just surviving? So, because you found comfortable places here, are you thriving as a people, or are you just doing okay in this survival mode? Because what? Because you got a paycheck that comes in good, from wherever it comes from. I say, as a people, for us to thrive, it can't be just you can't just have a few doing well and everybody else struggling.
We're using retail therapy instead of ceremony.
Well, yeah. I mean, or retail therapy associated with ceremony. I go back to the whole idea of people running to the store to buy strawberries for strawberry juice, not just for the strawberry ceremony. I remember somebody asked that question one time. How come we got strawberry juice at midwinters? How is that traditional? Somebody asked that question, and it just kind of left everybody thinking. Yeah,
good point.
Yeah, we got South American strawberries we picked up at Wegmans, and we got strawberry juice. Now, if the argument was, "Oh no, we dried these from what do they call it when they dry
Dehydrated
strawberries and we
reconstitute.
we reconstitute. No, that's not what you did. I mean, even if somebody said, "Well, we froze them," okay. Even though that wouldn't have been traditional. I mean, but the idea. I mean, again, that's kind of that question. So, if we're solving our problems by what's the expression that you use?
The expression basically goes along. I'm trying to remember which one.
The one is that you can't challenge your oppressor with the tools of you can't fight the oppressor with the tools of the oppressor. You have the other one. It's
you can't solve your problems using the same thinking that created them.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're trying to solve your problem by using the things that created that problem, then what are you left with when you think you've solved it? If you're still standing there with those same implements and that same thinking. Because, I mean, that's the tools really are not, I go back to the whole idea of burying the weapons under the tree of peace.
Yeah.
It's the tools are not the issue. It's what causes that. It's the thinking that, I mean, the same thing that might sustain life because it's used for hunting can also take life, in war. So what is the thinking behind that tool? Or is that shovel for planting or is that shovel for burying something you want hidden? So... I mean, this is the whole idea is what are the tools that we're employing? Because if we're employing the tools of the oppressor for us to have a little more comfortableness or comfort in this surviving mode that we're in, that's not what I'm striving. I'm not striving for that. I say, no, I want our people to prosper. Prosperity is what is my goal.
So what tools are we using to promote ourselves then?
Well,
what are we using to reignite our fire?
Well,
that's the issue that we got to look at.
Well, and we'll talk about that. We're at the bottom of the hour here, but my point is, even if we don't know where we want to be right now in terms of, because we've asked this question. Even Robert Delamonte and others have said, if we had everything we wanted, if we had things just the way we wanted them today, what would they look like? Even if we're not prepared to create that image of the present or the immediate future, there are steps that we can take. So my point is, and I get back to that, no, I'm not calling for revolution. I'm calling for baby steps. Maybe some big steps. I don't know. But there are things that we can do. We talk about, again, the fire. How do we rekindle the fire? One of the ways we rekindle the fire is by literally rekindling a fire. And so that may seem like a baby step, and it may even seem a bit simplistic. But those simple acts are the ones that build that path and get us back on that path. All right, we're at the bottom. What do we got here?
The Breed.
Oh, The Breed by John McLeod. All right. We'll be right back after this.
Yeah, they call me The Breed. My Indian blood serves me well. I live in California, chill in Arizona. I like it here, I do like it down here. Yeah, they call me The Breed. Firelight and is my charm. Yeah, they call me The Breed. Do Indian medicine all night long. Some spirits, they talk to me. Others walk right through me. They call me here. My relations down here. Breed. I call my Harley old midnight. Yeah, they call me The Breed. My Desert Eagle makes things right. Some women like to stone me, others like to hold me. They like me here, I like the women down here. call me the breed. That don't bother me no how. Now they call me the breed. My Indian blood serves me well. I live in California, chill in Arizona. I like it here, I really like it down here. I live in California, chill in Arizona. I like it here.
All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. We've got Matt Hill and Ed Schindler in the studio. Again, this isn't an unfamiliar question that we've asked or topic that we've discussed. I just think that it still comes back to this, to this idea of what steps are we taking? Because, I guess part of the issue is there's always this question of, well, are you, Indianer than somebody else or something like that? And, and my point is, I don't care if you're a Christian or a veteran or, if you're Longhouse or if you're band council or however American, Canadian. I mean, if those identifiers, or descriptors are something that you employ as part of your identity, I'm not going to sit there and say, shame on you. And I'm also not going to say, well, that puts you outside the circle. I'm not going to go there. What I'm going to say is, but are you comfortable with that? I mean, or are there steps that you want to take, even if they're small, to recapture that stolen identity that was stolen? I mean, or attempted to be, or stripped, or whatever else. That's the question that I have, and so I think that's part of what I wanted to. That's why I wanted the theme of the show to be, because I think everybody, even the most Indianist of us all, none of us are where we need to be as a community, as a people. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that I absolutely admire for their knowledge but because we all aren't there, none of us can completely be there. None of us are living under the Guyana or the Goa as a. And I don't want to make it sound like it's something you live underneath, but we haven't followed those white roots to that tree of peace. So we live under the shelter that the processes that resolve conflict afford us.
You can't say nobody is. I mean, there's people that are living under it, but not in any mass. Well,
but when I say nobody, what I really mean is that nobody has it where they want it to be. I'm saying that no matter where you are in that place, there's more that you can do, because there's things like schooling that you talk about all the time. There's things that we can do in terms of changing our commerce, and the fact that commerce doesn't have to be money oriented or money driven. It can be, or currency driven. It can. We all have a place that we can go to that advances more of that identity and more of a culture more of a satisfying culture that would appropriate. I
want to take it a step further. Is how do we make it contemporary?
Well, and that's exactly
how do we progress it to exist today with all the things that we face?
Well, and that's a question that, and I know Bob Del Monte and others have said, if we were living exactly the way we wanted to, what would it look like? And I think there are people who struggle with the answer with that, and I may be among them.
You'd have to incorporate everybody, everybody that's in this community. You'd have to take into consideration, there's different faiths, there's different, the demographics is just, it's so scattered.
Well, and the identities have been I don't want to even say diluted, but they've been diversified to such a point, that it's a little bit harder to wrap your head or your arms or hands around it. And so I think that it is a challenge. But
I mean, we're so easy to vote, but why can't we add our voice to a common fire? Okay, you have your group of people that follow a certain way, whatever that way is, right? You can delegate the same way in a clan system type deal. And then, what is your contribution to this issue that we have? To me, like you say all the time, it's a process. It's not any kind of religion. It doesn't matter what you believe in, but it's still the process. We still have to come together and contribute our thoughts and our ideas and our contribution towards a solution.
Well, and even these elected systems, like what the Sanic Nation has here, or what the band council system is on the Canadian side. Look, there's a huge difference between becoming a Canadian municipality and having a system that, frankly, resembles more of their system than our original system. There's still that's still a big leap. So the question is, and this is where I find even the work that I do with the Seneca Nation and or the assistance that I think I provide in terms of PR and that kind of stuff, and trying to communicate different issues, whether it's working with Ross or others. I am not a Seneca Nation employee. I live in the territory of the Onondaga. That's where I live, and as a result, and because of that, and this is one of the debates I got into on that thread that I was on about U.S. military and that kind of stuff. And somebody asked me, well, what do you do? I said, well, I support the community I live in. I advocate for what I think are the policies that should be employed, and I help give a voice to those issues, and I try to I do everything I do, maybe not everything I can, but I do what I do, some of that work. I think that even with an elected council, there's a movement that can employ elements of the Guyana-Ragoa. I think there are processes that can operate outside of the corporate structures or the management structures of a tribal administration, without necessarily saying, okay, we're going to take them out. I remember, again, I've said it before on the show. It's not sometimes about changing the governing system if the governing system isn't working. It's about making it less relevant. If you can reduce a failing system, and I say this to any American, or Canadian for that matter, if you can reduce the relevance of an ineffective governing system by taking more control of the issues that are addressed by it, you can, then that is part of that process. That's, to me, putting that one step ahead of the other to say, this is the path I want to go back to. So it's not just about saying, okay, we're going to have a vote, a referendum tomorrow to return to the Guyana-Ragoa and do away with this system or that system. Because, frankly, we have people that are so confused about what that even means. I mean, obviously, we have people who, because of religious beliefs, and I don't mean just Christian or Gaiweo. We have people who would at this point reject certain elements of the Guyana-Ragoa, or how do you say it in Seneca?
Ganosakawa.
And it's rejected because it's already become foreign to them.
Yes.
So they'll say that's not ours, or that's not ours anymore, or or something like that, and then, how do we make it ours again? Mm-hmm. I want to go to a story because you told me a story today that I thought was interesting, and you and I had a discussion about the answer to a question a woman raised to you. You got a ride the other day coming up 4:38.
I was coming back from Irving, and I got a ride from her, and she said, I want to ask you a question. It may sound pretty stupid, but she asked, do all Native Americans have that special power that non-Indians don't have? And my response there was simply that the only thing I can think of that you're talking about is that we have a common language. We have a common culture.
You're not thinking of that cartoon,
history.
Are you? Okay.
We have a community. We have a land base. And all of this creates a community that the people all recognize. Okay? That's something we have, and whether we know it or not, that's really a big deal, because we can talk about a lot of things here, but a lot of people on the territory here, they recognize each other and they acknowledge each other as part of the community. Mm-hmm. And if we were to help expand the knowledge of what was once considered common knowledge, common teaching, that would help people even find a bigger base than just a land base. It'd be even more so. It doesn't mean that it'd be the so-called right way and only way, but it'd be a way to think.
Well, and of course, my answer that I offered up, which is kind of where you were going with it, is that we all are born with powers that we don't recognize.
Yes.
And part of the reason we lose that power And I'm not saying special powers like superhero stuff. I mean, but
I was laughing. I was just thinking that'd be a perfect setup.
Oh, yeah.
I would have took that for a ride.
yeah, I know you would have. He's like, I'm using mine on you right now.
That's how I had you pick me up.
I forced you.
Yeah.
No.
You will give me a ride home.
The Jedi mind tricks, yeah. But no, I mean, my point is that we have that beaten out of us, and I don't mean, sometimes literally, but I think indoctrination, education, for lack of a better word. But it's not just Native people. All people are born with the powers that creation provides them. But we are told, and some people call that those original instructions, right?
Yes.
That animals still rely on instinct because they don't communicate the way we do. Our ability to communicate and reason sometimes suppresses those very skills, and I don't want to call them powers, but skills. Mm-hmm. The skills that we not just ignore or neglect, but we literally lose. Now, what I will say about Native people is that there are probably more Native people who still maintain a closer connection to that power of creation. So if that's what is being perceived as a special power, it's only because you have lost yours. Mm-hmm. And it, not permanently necessarily, but because you don't recognize. I will say, when I was a kid growing up, I'm from Gunawaga, but my father was a high steel worker, so we lived in various places. And I remember when I was living in a little town that had, I was the only Native family, or my family was the only Native family there. So anytime I could run a little faster or jump a little higher or maybe knock somebody down a little harder, it was like, oh yeah, that's because he's Indian. That's what they always said, It's like they associated, any skill set that I would have that, might have exceeded theirs. Oh, yeah, that's because he's Indian. Of course it wasn't. I mean, but there is that mystique, and the fact that a woman would ask you that question, contemporarily, it doesn't surprise me because that's that sense. I mean, let me
look in my bag. Yeah, he's got his backpack.
yeah, there you go. But but I think it's interesting because when I say that we have suppressed or lost or ignored or neglected those powers, that those skills are part of that identity. So my point is, again, going back to the original statement, are we okay with the fact that we've let that stuff go? Or do we want some of that back? And I'm not just talking about the ability to speak to animals or dog whisperer or any of that stuff. I mean, no. I'm saying, do we want to have a better understand the relation? I mean, we do that Ahonda Guri with Dekwa, the Ganunyo, the opening. Do we want to really let that be a part of our lives to where we understand the relationship with creation or not? Because if we don't, if we're comfortable with the man-made structures that we've centered our life around, the dollar bill, the paycheck, the wallet, the car, whatever it is, the electric. I mean, or do we want to say, look, I like some of these amenities, but I don't like the idea that it's so connected to beyond my control, because I think that's the end of the day. When I think about being native, being sovereign, is to say, how do we make sure that we can carry ourselves? So we talk about Dewatatawi. I mean, how do we ensure that? Because if we're that dependent on somebody else's infrastructure, financial infrastructure, the grid, the roads, all that stuff, how do we make sure that we survive? Because my problem is, for all those that are comfortable with the status quo, what they're not recognizing is the status quo is not so secure.
No. Climate
change, political unrest. Look at what's happening in the United States and in places around the world. I'm not just talking about the quote unquote terrorism. I don't know if there's any more violence today than there was 30, 40. I mean, the United States has only got like what was it, 23 years of the United States' entire existence that they weren't involved in military conflict,
major war.
Yeah, I mean I made a comment on Facebook this week. I said, they call them World War I and World War II, but they really weren't. They weren't world wars. Mm-hmm. There was a few upstarts, in the first one, it was primarily just Germany. in what they call the second one. It was Germany, Italy, and Japan. But the entire world wasn't engaged in a war. It wasn't a global conflict. It was still pretty regional. And the players, I mean, the United States was a player in both of them. But you don't hear a whole lot about South America being involved in World War or Africa. I'm not saying that didn't spill out, but the conflicts now are probably hitting more areas of the globe, especially if you're gonna count terrorist act, but even the social unrest. I mean, I don't know when people say, "Well, you got to worry about Trump. He's going to cause World War III." Well, I don't know the conflicts that are existing today, and the many fronts that those conflicts exist on. I don't know that the geography is any smaller than what existed for what people will now call world wars. And again, I'm not suggesting that label fit those conflicts any more than to call what's happening today a global conflict. Which gets me back a little bit to what Paul is always quick to remind me and others of. Look, don't get consumed by the stuff that you can't have impact on. There are things, and this is where that whole idea of all politics is local, and it's not just all politics, but the things that affect you on a daily basis are the things that you confront on a daily or experience on a daily basis. I mean, if we don't watch television or the internet, we can be completely oblivious to some of the things that are happening in other parts of the world. I'm not saying being completely oblivious is a perfect solution, but I think putting everything in its proper context and understand, I know there are plenty of people, conspiracy theorists and people who are saying that everything is a false flag event, every conflict, every violent act. And I don't know that I buy all of that. But what I will say is when something happens in my neighborhood, then I'll know if it's real or not. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying I'll have all the information. But what can I do to help prevent those kinds of events from happening?
That's where I think there has to be like you said, a small step, baby step. We have to start getting what used to be within history of our people. I mean, the United States is based on the Haudenosaunee because there was such a capability of communication.
Of resolving conflict.
Right, and they used that communication to avoid conflict. And if conflict did exist, then fine, they even went further and made sure there was resolution. But it wasn't made so that, okay, here's the decision, and here's the, where they say, okay, this is the prerequisite, or what is that called, where they make the court decision, and that's what you're going to go by?
Oh, yeah, this is the precedent.
Yeah. And then, therefore, this is what you're going to use to, resolve any and all conflicts.
Well, see, the problem with any of that is that it still requires a use of force to say, yes, this is now the new standard.
Right.
And we're going to enforce it. The problem is, people don't realize that the solution to conflict is not a bigger gun.
No.
I mean, the solution to hate is not, you can't kill it away. You can't fight it away. You can't use war to create peace. Now, and I think that especially today, now that we understand that, that it's not, war isn't just about militaries. It can be insurgencies and that kind of thing. If you don't realize that the way to solve conflicts is through understanding, discussion. I'm not even going to get the hugging and the peace, but it's diplomacy. When you talk about what the United States saw in the Haudenosaunee, was they saw statesmanship. Mm-hmm. But look how dysfunctional their governments have gotten now. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they lost from right to left, even in their own Congress. They can't even communicate.
You hear about war heroes, but you don't hear about peace negotiators.
Yeah. No, nobody never. I mean, with the possible exception of somebody like Martin Luther King, who ended up being killed, murdered. Mm-hmm. People don't talk about the peace activists. And
that was for civil, though, not international.
Right.
But the thing, where was I going with this now?
Well, the whole idea of promoting war heroes is to suggest that the solution is brave, a brave fighter. Fight your way out of every conflict.
I was going to refer to the Black Wampum, and that the Black Wampum wasn't a war belt. It was, it was an explanation. This is, what they explained what the Black Wampum represented, they offered them the peace. This is what we can do to you. We have this many people. We can, take you out so many different ways or whatever, and explain to them, do you accept this peace or do you expect the opposite? And then, they gave them the offer to them 3 times. If they still want to act up and do it, then you got till the time it drops. Yeah. It hits the ground. And so that's one thing I was looking at, why don't we use those kind of tactics today? They don't implement those kind of things.
Well, and it's really easy. I mean, Barack Obama was always famous for saying war is the last resort, sending in troops and using military. But it isn't. No, it hasn't been used that way. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the United States, the founding fathers of the United States, were expressed deep concern about a professional standing army, because they knew that an army could serve tyranny.
Right.
Dwight Eisenhower made it very clear in his statements about being concerned about the military-industrial complex, where you start tying economics to war, and the idea that they support each other. That's kind of part of that analogy. But the reality is, war is now become it's
industry. No.
Yeah, it's not just an industry, but it is not the last resort. The idea of even the arms escalation. I mean, the United States drops 2 atomic bombs on a small island country and initiates what is probably, still today, the largest global threat.
But even today, you look at wars, as they say, wars. We're not really at war with people. It's a military operation where they're holding people and blowing people up, and from a radio controlled.
And they use the threat of war. But they're saying, well, if we don't do this, then we could, it's like the debate I was in as well. If we don't do this, what's to stop a country from invading the United States? Nobody's going to invade the United States. And they said, well, what about 9/11? That wasn't an invasion. There's
not even any outline of what their actions are supposed to be. They're just going in there and blowing the place up. They don't say, well, you got to. There's no deadlines.
Yeah.
What do they call it? When you have a certain deadline, you got to beat requirements to do it.
Ultimatum.
Yeah, ultimatum.
Yeah.
They don't give them ultimatum. They just go and they blow them.
Well,
out.
and the reality is, the reason terrorists, or terrorists do what they do is because they're in a weakened spot. I mean, Hannah Arendt, who was a famous, philosopher, and and she coined the expression totalitarianism. She was involved in the war crimes, the Nazi war crimes, and that kind of stuff. But she, her statement and her philosophy was that the use of force and the use of violence is not born out of power; it's born out of weakness. Mm-hmm. And I think the idea that terrorism is now employed the way it is, it shows that when you are in the most weakened state, if you're right, if you have righteousness on your side, then you probably don't need to kill anybody.
Yeah.
And if you're in a desperate situation, or if in spite of the fact that you might be right, if you're weak because you don't have the support and you are a very oppressed people, then your only recourse is violence. So when you think about the use of force, I mean, it isn't that it's necessary. It's that it's done out of weakness, not out of strength.
Right.
I mean, and so the people who choose to do things, like, even I don't know, it's probably too late to try to find it, but in record, if you go, I've got a recording there.
What do you need?
Look in the. It's probably in the network there, but it's not in recordings. But when you go, look down on the bottom. See there where it says this is Indian country.
I
just seen it.
Yeah, but anyway, my point is, when the United States dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan, what they was suggesting, when they asked a question about something like collateral damage. Okay, we got to pull it up. Let me just play this, and we'll go out with just a few comments about that. Listen to this for just a second.
Civilian casualties.
Could be.
listen.
You got a 1 mile blast radius.
We are extremely careful, always are. This is Indian country. This is enemy country. This is a place where if you're there, you're likely collaborating or working with ISIS. Unfortunately, in any of these scenarios, you're going to have some level of civilian casualties. We don't want them. We don't normally permit them in any mass level, but you're going to have them. And you can apologize for them, but it happens. It's war.
All right, so there you go. What this is their explanation justifying, civilian casualties, because, this military expert on Fox News said, look, this is Indian country. Anybody there is the enemy, essentially. And which is, so not only is, obviously it's offensive as Native people, but that whole rationale that you can use war to kill anybody and anything because you can create a justification. I mean, this is part of the problem. And again, to get back to what our whole theme was, is everybody comfortable with that, or do we want to pursue an alternative path, one that has been, it should be embedded in our DNA by now?
One of the things I'd like people to understand is that quote that I gave is a quote from Albert Einstein, the one that says we cannot solve our problems using the same thinking that created them. And that's where what we've been talking about is just that, where people use that same thinking, trying to solve their problems they use the same thinking that created them. Yeah.
I mean, and it's ironic that Albert Einstein is associated with nuclear weapons. Nobel, Alfred Nobel, is it Alfred? Yeah, Nobel. He's associated with
TNT.
Yeah, TNT, dynamite. So I mean, so you listen to these people who have these prophetic quotes. I mean, Einstein also says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
I just learned about Nobel on Trivia, Craig.
Oh, did you? Oh, there you go. All right. Hey, look, this is a discussion that I think is necessary, and it's one that even though we have it here on our show, it's one that should continue. And I hope as we pass on the street and we share these thoughts on Facebook, that people are willing to engage this question and realize that none of us need to be excluded. Our culture is a culture of inclusion. The question is, what are we trying to include people if you're bring into what? And that's the question. Bring ourselves into what? Are we comfortable where we're at? Is that what we're trying to include people in? I mean, or are we trying to include people into something that is a little bit more culturally appropriate? It's John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll see you on Monday.
Yeah.
No.